Joe?
How are you?
Let's cap on.
It helps, doesn't it?
That'll slow you down.
I don't know. I'd have to pump it all again, you know.
I know what I'm doing. I think. Maybe I don't. Huh? It's okay, I know what I'm doing. Don't worry, I'm not gonna hit you then. Huh? Yeah, that's all I gotta do. Everybody see that okay? Kathy, can you see this?
Thank you.
What'd you say? It's perfect. It's not mine. Is there anything that says we can't start new without Pete?
He's outside.
Why not? Yeah, we're not gonna wait for the lawyer.
Hi, Pete, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
You don't know who played.
Before we get started, I want to recognize the significance of this day. Certainly this day has a different meaning for all of us in one way or the other, kind of remembering back to where we were. And I gave a proclamation at the school today, and kids are between kindergarten and fourth grade, so talking to them is a little bit different. You know, about this day is a little bit different than it is for probably most of us. We talked about Patriot Day and what it means to be a patriot, that type of thing. That was pretty good. And then Joe Barton just brought me this poster, and I'll share it with the group. But these are the views from the observation deck of the World Trade Center. And I guess for me, personally, this day has a lot of significance because the day after it happened, we could actually smell the cloud, the dust cloud that came from the Manhattan that day. So that day I'll always remember that day. And I think just, with all of us together tonight, and before we get started, I'm just going to ask for a moment of silence to remember this day. That's it. I'm just going to ask for a moment of silence before we get started. Thank you, folks. Mr. Barton, thank you for the poster.
Everybody that just wasn't the World Trade Center, but it was the Pentagon and Flight 93 also.
Not an easy thing to forget. Okay, at this point, we're going to call the meeting of the Tabernacle Township meeting to order. Folks, please join me in saying the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This special meeting was called pursuant to the Open Public Meeting Law. This meeting of the September the 11th was sent to the Courier Post, Burlington County Times, and Central Record on August the 28th, 2017. Notices have been posted on the bulletin board at Town Hall and continues to be posted as required notices under statute. A copy of this notice has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. We have roll call Mr. Barton.
Present.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Franzen.
Here.
Mr. Yates.
Here.
Mayor Lee.
here.
Thank you.
Thanks, LaShawn. At this point, we're going to take public comment on agenda items only. If you're interested in being heard this evening, please raise your hand. I'll call on you. Limit your, have to actually say who you are, where you live here in town, or if you're not in town, let us know that as well. And at this point, we'll open up the meeting of the public. Do you have time? Okay. At this point, we'll open up the meeting of the public. Seeing none, we'll close the public.
Hold on, I was just waiting to say.
Were you hiding behind the camera?
I'm not even standing at the
There's
camera.
something about the person that stands there and can't get their hand up in time.
Kathy Berger, 18 Woodside Drive. I just wanted to say I'm opposed to the ordinance for the public safety director. I don't feel we need a public safety director in this town. I believe the fire company can report to the administrator with no problem. I feel you should do a separate contract with the squad. I think you should treat them as a separate company like a contract, treat them just like they're the trash company, and the administrator can manage that as well. I don't know how you're talking about taking over billing if you haven't had a conversation with them yet. And if you have had a conversation, I'm wondering when that took place, because I don't believe it's been discussed here in public. So I have a real problem with that. I've said this for 2 years now, that I don't think we need a public safety director. And I think TRS has done a great job with managing emergency services. I think they should be commended for that, and I think there's no reason they can't operate on their own and be treated as a separate contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public. Need a motion to approve the bills, please. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Second.
Second. And that includes the August 25th and September 8th?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barton.
Yes.
Ms. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Franzen.
Yes.
Mr. Yates.
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes.
Thank
Approval of minutes for the July 24th meeting, regular session. We only had one session. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Any questions or comments? Roll call.
you. Mr. Barton.
Yes.
Ms. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Franzen.
Yes.
Mr. Yates.
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. First reading the ordinance of the Township of Tabernacle, amending Chapter 8, Flood Damage Prevention Hazard Areas of the revised Township Code ordinances. Public hearing will be September the 25th, here in this building at 7:30. Any questions or comments regarding this before we ask for a first and a second? Need a first, please? Or a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Second. Thank you, Mr. Yates. Any questions or comments this time by the committee? Roll call, please.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Next item is the first reading for the bond ordinance of the Township of Tabernacle, County of Burlington, State of New Jersey, in the amount of $355,000 for public works trucks. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. Doug, you want to touch on this at all before we,
I can.
okay.
We are looking at one conventional dump truck and one hook-lift truck for replacement of actually 6 of our trucks. The thought process after meeting with the Public Works Subcommittee was that we reduce the number of vehicles in our fleet, and the hook lift allows us to have multiple uses for one truck chassis, which in the overall scheme of things keeps it running more often, lets us have less issues from trucks sitting. Also is a safer way to transfer the bodies as compared to with the hook portion of the backhoe and proper cabling to change leaf boxes off and on the back of the conventional dump truck. It also allows us in the future, as different bodies are required, that we most likely can purchase them in our annual budget rather than go out and borrow capital for them. So in those 2 instances, we've taken the direction of the committee, specifically the Public Works Subcommittee, and also suggestions that Mr. Barton has made as far as financing, and it allows us to address them in a more complete and thorough way.
Anything else for Doug? Public hearing for this will be, again, our next meeting, September 25th at 7:30, or maybe 7:35.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item, introduced on first reading, ordinance of the Township of Tabernacle, County of Burlington, State of New Jersey, designated and officially creating a Department of Public Safety and the position of Public Safety Director. Need a motion, please?
Make that motion?
Thank you, Mr. Yates. Need a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. I know there's some discussion that we want to have on this evening here at the table. We had talked about this almost July at this point. The ordinance that we had discussed, which was ordinance 2017, doesn't have a number on it, because this is a draft. I have copies up here for the public if anyone is interested. Stu, can you make a favor? Put those on the George or Dave or something?
The committee had brought up a couple of issues when this ordinance was originally considered or discussed. Any or all of which could be considered tonight as part of the introduction. The language could then be modified and then released for a second reading. What's out there and what's being disseminated is the version that was put together initially by me and distributed on redistributed I should say, on July 21st. Mr. Franz had made at least one comment. He indicated that he thought that the qualifications and experience needed for the position should be further expanded. Colonel Lowe indicated in his comments that he thought that the qualifications should mirror that of an emergency management coordinator. And so really it's a question of preference from the committee as to what kind of detail they'd like to be have included therein. If you went the route of detailing the same qualifications as is required for the emergency management coordinator to have. That would certainly create a redundancy. It may limit the pool of candidates, or you could do something in between. Other than just kind of creating general language without any specificity, I really have nothing to add or suggest in furtherance of Mr. Franz's comments, other than to say it was something that he focused on, and the committee would have to tell me if they have any specific ideas concerning what those qualifications might be, unless they want to accept the recommendation as was advanced by the colonel that they should mirror the qualifications of the emergency management coordinator. Maybe Colonel Lowe could expand, if he'd like it or not, on what he thought was critical and why going to that degree might be beneficial. Colonel Lowe, did you want to add to that? Did I accurately reflect your comment?
With the codicil that I said that I didn't think you needed a separate public safety director. What I feel you could do is combine the public safety director and the OEM into one position. Therefore, you're covering the whole gamut of public safety from preparedness all the way through the execution. I felt that with the way it's built now, you're building in a conflict between the public safety director and the OEM. Quite frankly, who's in charge? Well, prior to an emergency, the public safety director. After the emergency, the OEM. That could develop into real problems, and some of those problems we've seen in other townships where public safety directors have a tendency to come in and out with the tide. So that would also, by doing that, that would start to identify some of the requirements that you need for a public safety director, not the least of which you have to be a resident of the township, which I think is one of those things that should be critical. The other side of that thing, you should not be a member of any existing organization at the time and during the period of service. It also gives a 3-year term limitation on the position built into it. The OEM already has a 3-year term limitation. By combining the two, you're built in a term limitation for the public safety director too. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. For the record, there was Colonel Lowe, Emergency Management Coordinator, Township Tabernacle.
And this ordinance, as it's currently written, does make it a combined position, right? Or it says it provides that it could be, right? So, does that address Mr. Franzen's concerns? Mr. Franzen, do you have any other specifics regarding that comment?
Well, my comments were to the fact that I didn't see, requirements for the job, and I also mentioned that, I certainly was not qualified to determine what they were. I think Colonel Lowe's idea probably makes a lot of sense, and for the reasons that he mentioned, I won't need to repeat them. And I would support changes that go along with what he says, and are more specific in terms of what the job is.
So if you wanted to remain flexible and allow it to be a separate person potentially, then you would leave it the way it is. If you wanted to restrict it, to require it to be a joint position, again, you might limit your pool of candidates. That might make it more difficult to fill the position. Right now, it has the flexibility, and should the committee have sensitivity to that person's qualifications, they'll always be able to allow, as long as it's the people up here making the decision, to make it a unified, a joint position, the same person. And the ordinance certainly contemplates that as currently written.
Anything else?
There's another issue. There also was a mention that the ordinance should refer generically to the service providers. In other words, that the firefighting would be provided by the Tabernacle Fire Company #1 or any other company duly organized and serving the town, so that it would, as it was explained when this was first discussed, provide some flexibility there. I did reference specifically in the ordinance the Tabernacle Rescue Squad and the Fire Company #1, Tabernacle Fire #1. I can easily add language that would say, or any other entity that's duly organized and providing services in Tabernacle Township. And so you wouldn't necessarily, by ordinance, have to use those, so that's probably a good suggestion. I
Or
think
would you
that-
use language that specifies designated by the township committee?
Certainly, yeah.
Because anybody could just go form a fire company or a rescue squad and go perform service, maybe a duly recognized committee.
Yeah, they can't actually provide
That's
services.
a good point.
They can't actually provide services in the town without being recognized, but that's great. We'll just say duly recognized and contracted by the community.
I'm going to ask a question to, this is a question that's going to go out to Chief Smith, Tabernacle Fire Company, and Chief Jackson, whoever he is. Is there, I didn't see you, George, sorry. I thought you came in. Is there a comfort level with the two organizations? I guess my question is, does the rescue squad and the fire company have more of a comfort level if they're named in this ordinance versus us having a generic piece that we're talking about doing? Because I guess my thought is, at least my personal opinion is that we want to continue the relationship with both organizations. So my question to you is there more of a comfort level for both organizations knowing that you're named in here specifically in the ordinance?
You can do both. I mean, it can be and or.
Okay.
So we can
I
recognize them.
understand what Stephen's trying to say. He wants to give them the comfort level that I'm not going to go pick an or.
Right.
I believe that's what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I got you,
Yeah.
okay.
He wants to give them the assurance that it's them.
Right, so leave it as them for now, exclusively.
Well, I mean, we've got to kind of collectively decide here what we want to do as a committee, but I'm asking George and Dave what their thoughts are.
The contract gives us more security than that, correct? Because you guys can change this at any meeting, at least with the contract, that we're given 90 days if you decide to get rid of it.
That's right.
So really,
Well, this isn't at any meeting, that's an ordinance.
This is
so
an ordinance.
well, you can
It's
change
the same,
that.
same amount of time frame.
We could change the ordinance, yeah. But the idea is that both the fire company and, yeah, to answer your question, I guess, this sets it up to where both the fire company and the rescue squad are under contract. But my question is, do you want it in the ordinance as well as the contract? Is that more of an insurance policy for the companies, knowing that they're in here by ordinance and not just a contract? Does it give you guys more of a comfort level and our confidence in the two companies?
Of course it would, you're listing us in the squad in there, yes.
George, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, you're putting it in there, it's in an ordinance, which is technically a law, although it can be changed, there's a process to do that, you know, and then we would obviously iron out an agreement of how we operate and whatever the details, but doesn't hurt us to be in there. I would think, yeah, it's more of an insurance level, sure.
Okay, all right.
You're an ordinance now, right?
We're an ordinance now anyway.
Yeah, that's the way they've been. And we have a contract that we have to get finalized with the rescue squad, which is it's a matter of getting it complete and signed. But my only thought was, in reading this, was that it gives the organizations a confidence level that this is the direction we want to go. But the committee may have other thoughts. I want to get viewpoints of the chiefs.
Mayor, I wouldn't want to lock this committee or a future committee into these specific organizations. I would like to have the flexibility to name them, but also have the flexibility that if things change, to also go in another direction. If the flexibility is not there, by ordinance, you're locked in, and if you want to change it, you have to change the ordinance. I understand the comfort level of naming them. I too had an issue with what Committeeman Franzen had, that said, under training, it says public safety director shall be qualified by training and experience with the duties of his or her office. I'm not sure what that means, because we didn't qualify what training and what experience we're looking for the public safety director. I also am not in favor of having a combined public safety director OEM coordinator. Other municipalities, I don't know of any other municipality that does that. Clearly, if there is a major incident, the OEM coordinator is in charge, and the public safety director just needs to understand that. But the purpose that I see of the public safety director here is to manage all emergency services in Tabernacle Township, which is fire, EMS, and have oversight over the OEM operation. And you have department heads in each of those, you have chiefs, and you have the OEM coordinator. Also, there's a section under Division of Emergency Services, the last paragraph, that talks about the billing, and that it's under the public safety director. And if that's going to take place, there's billing other than just for ambulance service. There's also billing available for rescue and for fire. So I would like to see that paragraph under the division or the Department of Public Safety, and have the public safety director responsible for all billing, whether it's fire, EMS, or rescue. And I believe that's the only other comment I had is there is a section in here where the mayor makes an appointment to the OEM coordinator, and I believe that should be the township committee.
It is the township committee.
Right.
That's how it is now, which we still need to do.
What's that last issue?
Under Office of Emergency Management, it says the head of which shall be the Director of Emergency Management, who shall be appointed by the mayor. I believe that should say township committee. And then under the Office of Emergency Management, just to keep the document consistent, under the fire department and under the rescue, it talks about no smoking. That's not in the OEM section. I think just cut and paste that over, just so they're all consistent.
Going back to the, back up a few steps to the end. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Lee, Mayor, that is the language right out of the statute. And so when you have a strong mayor in a Faulkner municipality, the mayor would make that appointment. You collectively exercise all of the executive authority in this old borough or old municipality committee kind of form of government. So even though it does say the mayor, but, and actually I should change it to reflect the unique circumstance here in Tabernacle. And that is that you have an old committee form of government where all 5 members. So what I could do is change that, and I should change that to reflect reality, which is that you exercise as a body the executive authority, and that therefore in this case it would be the committee. And that's just the law, it's not anyone's preference, so we'll make that change for sure. And then I had you mentioning also the flexibility of wanting flexibility for either company or future companies to be appointed. What does training and qualifications mean exactly? And that there should also be billing for rescue and fire, and that the PSD should be responsible for all of that billing.
I mean, under, and we haven't defined what that training and duties are. And I'm not sure we have to. I mean, there are municipalities where one of the committee persons is the public safety director. A lot of towns do that. In a lot of other places, it's a former police officer, or it could be a police officer if they don't have a police chief. In our case, where we need to have state police, we don't have a police department here.
That's where the language was kind of written to be generic in that all different types of individuals may be candidates for this position. So when it says shall be qualified by their training experience, shall be qualified by their training experience, whatever it might be, should the committee define it to be acceptable. If you want to get into limiting the candidate pool or making certain recommendations that candidates would have to achieve before they be a candidate, then that's fine. But for exactly the sentiment that you expressed, it's in there as a generality, whatever their training and qualification. Each one is going to have different training and qualification. There's no particular set of training and qualification that's going to make them to be qualified. So because of what you said, you have the emergency management coordinator, you know, they're a management coordinating and supervision. It could be a police officer, it could be a member of the committee. Actually, it couldn't, I don't think, be a member of the committee if it's a paid position in this town. And in this town, we don't delegate that individual authority to anybody. But in any event, they would otherwise limit the pool of candidates. And you are absolutely correct to recognize, Mr. Barton, that there are many people serving as a public safety director that have sometimes little qualifications, but for maybe their familiarity with the police department in town, the emergency services in town, maybe they're an accountant, qualifications and experience, whatever it might be, in the general sense, because people will bring different things to the table. If you want to be more specific, we can, but I need to know because I don't know. I mean, Colonel Lowe would be much better to expand on what the qualifications and experience is going to be if we're going to make it a mandate. Personally, I believe you unduly limit the pool of candidates, and in the future, you're going to be trying to put a square peg into a round hole, even though you want that square peg to go in the round hole, and it might be actually an appropriate peg to use.
Should we add to that sentence then, Peter, which would clarify the meaning of that? Prior to his or her appointment, the public safety director shall be qualified by training and experience for the duties of his or her office as determined by the township committee?
Sure.
Which is, yeah. Because when I read it, I was looking at whether there should be a job spec or there should be a qualification tied to it, but if it's something we're going to make a judgment call. And in this case, the public safety director is not going to direct fire or rescue. It's a management position. The individual departments do that.
And that was one of the concerns of the colonel in his piece that he put together. He indicated that he certainly was concerned about that conflict in roles. And the way it's written right now, it clearly defines that the public safety director's responsibilities and authority basically ceases the minute there's a declared emergency and it's a response. And I believe that's the way it should be also. Colonel had some concerns about limited circumstances where the public safety director who holds the purse strings may want to have some authority in an emergency. But I would explain to the colonel that the idea that there's going to be an expenditure, the person who holds the reins can go to the public safety director and say, I'd like you to authorize this expense in this emergency. Do you have the authority and the budget to do that? And certainly would be, I think, expected to do that, as opposed to potentially given, I guess your concern in that regard, Colonel, was that, and you gave the example of the tire fire and expending the money and having to have somebody who had the ability to expend money and some control over the budget to be involved. I think you can have that without giving them any actual authority during an emergency. I really think that what I've seen in the ordinances around the state and in my experience is that, and I think Colonel largely would want to understand that once an emergency is declared, he doesn't have to deal with a public safety director who's an accountant and was put in that position for other reasons in responding to the emergency, although that might involve resource issues and expending public funds. So as determined by the Township Committee, certainly that's implicit, but we can make it overt and add that language.
Thank you. That's the only comments I have, man.
I want to go back to the and/or for a second in terms of the naming of the organizations. If the committee does not want to put this in the ordinance, that's fine, but I want to get one of the first things to do, if not before the ordinance is even passed, I want to get a contract finalized with the ambulance company to get that sorted out. So there's no question about where we are, because I want to make sure that we're protected in terms of our ambulance company. Mr. Franz, did you have any other comments to make on this?
I did have comments last time about background checks, and I'm still of the opinion that all three organizations should have it spelled out in this document that they need to do background checks on their members. We have it spelled out for the CERT. I thought it was spelled out for emergency services, but I'm not able to find it right now. I know it's not spelled out for the fire company. In my opinion, it should be spelled out that all the organizations have to do background checks on their employees.
There was also a piece about tobacco products under the Division of Emergency Services, but not under the Division of Fire and the
It's under fire.
office.
It's under there.
It is?
Bottom of page 2.
Oh, God, okay. Oh, but OEM doesn't have, that's what I'm looking at. So OEM can smoke, but
OEM can't smoke. I saw that comment by the colonel as well. You put that in there in reference to the companies because you're dealing with a category of volunteers. And it's there to be overt so that volunteers understand it's in the ordinance. You can't be coming in and hanging around the facilities and using tobacco products. The township never gives up the authority to set policy, and it hardly stands for the proposition by way of exclusion that the department, when we talk about the Department of Emergency Management Service, what are we talking about? Are we talking about all the LEPC and the CERT members and everything like that? And certainly, you know, the township has a policy, I think you can't smoke, there's a state law, you can't smoke. It's just aimed at the cadre of volunteers that would be servicing both entities, the fire and the emergency, to make it clear so that they don't have to be explained by the chief, or there can't be any arm twisting to do anything different, that, you know, when you're performing service as a volunteer, you're at or on or in the assets of the township that can't use tobacco products. I could add something with respect to the Office of Emergency Management, but I hardly think it's the same thing.
does that even need to be in the ordinance?
I don't think so, but I understand,
I'm just saying.
I
in
understand the
general.
colonel's concern,
I
and,
don't think you understand my concern.
okay.
I'm not sure either.
Can you explain it,
The,
please?
the concern was you focused on smoking, and there's other issues out there that are much more important, but you detailed smoking, and then you left off with OEM. Now, as the OEM, I'm glad you left it off of there because I smoke a pipe. But I figured you did that on purpose. So I thought you were well-meaning. But my real point of that was, we focused on something like that. There's other issues, whether it's the qualifications for the public safety director or it's the funding thing. And the bouncing around of the funding thing is really, 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 really critical to this whole issue.
What's that have to do with smoking?
You also left off the important point that I said, regardless of how you do it, and I want these people to understand this, regardless of how you do it, I intend to resign so that you have a clear field of who to appoint to this position, whether it's an appointed position together, or you've got to go out and find them separate. I want to take personalities out of this thing. I'm getting really tired of hearing Colonel O thinks this and Colonel O thinks that. Colonel O is, as a resident and taxpayer of this township, and a public safety expert, sort of, but you need to understand there are people in this township that are qualified to take this position as a joint position or as an individual position. I can point out 3 or 4 in this room right now that can do the job. The qualifications for the job, you want the guy to understand emergency services. That means he's got to know ICS and that type of thing. Thank you.
Hey folks, anything else?
Yeah, you said should be in this ordinance, names, the organizations. Mrs. Berger brought up a question about the billing. My understanding that yourself and Tim met with the squad. Could you inform us of what transpired?
It's you can give out a report.
I gave a bunch of.
Somebody please speak.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
We met, we haven't come to a conclusion as to where we are really, where we're at. We had one meeting Thursday.
What was presented?
It was just a discussion to get started.
I can tell you exactly what we presented. It wasn't well received. You know, this committee has had has a pretty good track record in terms of supporting the volunteers that work in emergency services, whether it be the rescue squad or the fire company. The fire company, when I say the fire company, I should refer mainly to the fire district because they're the ones that have done a lot of the legwork when it came to building the fire company and building Medford Farms Fire Company. And the rescue squad benefited from our support also with the purchasing of equipment. 99 is an example, and the building of that building over on New Road. So the concept that Kim and I had talked about after we had left this meeting was to essentially have, and I write this out every time I talk about it, but anybody can open my diagram after I'm done, I guess. But you essentially have a line item for fire services in Tabernacle right now that's in our budget. And we've eliminated the fire district. So the township is responsible for the income that comes in from the taxpayers that goes directly to the fire company. The rescue squad came to us in 2012, probably earlier than that, wanting to do a billing program, which you were part of, and wasn't really sure whether or not it would work or not. We didn't have a fire district to contend with. There were a lot of factors that were very, very different then than there are now. And the squad's been very successful in terms of building the organization from the ground up with our support and with the taxpayers' support, in addition to the billing income that we've been able to experience, or the organization's been able to experience. So we have two very good organizations that have been essentially built with taxpayer money for the most part. The concept that we presented was that the income from the fire company, or the income from the line item on the budget, would go into a pool, and the income that came from the billing revenue would go into the same pool. And what would happen was that that pool of money would be used to fund emergency services across the board, whether it be fire, whether it be EMS, whether it be OEM, or whatever it was. So the funding source is two avenues: the line item in the budget and the income from the billing money. Well, in addition to that, the fire company has their own budget. The rescue squad has their own budget. Right off the top, the idea is that the income that comes from the billing goes to essentially to the same place it's been going all along. The rescue squad continues to be able to pay their expenses that they have incurred, and the fire company does the same thing with theirs. But what happens is that pool, or that pool of money, for lack of better terms, is facilitated through the public safety coordinator. And the public safety coordinator and the chiefs of both departments, for lack of better terms, or the squad and the fire company, are the ones that are making the long-term decisions in terms of what the emergency service needs are. So the township committee is essentially out of the equation, which they ought to be, in my opinion. The decisions about what to do with resources, and in terms of what to do with the needs of equipment and so forth, and everything from the LoSAP program, whether or not to keep it or not, to the compensation program that the squad does, all those decisions ought to be between people that are a lot more qualified than me. It ought to be with a public safety coordinator. It ought to be with the chiefs of the two organizations, perhaps the LEPC, or a small group that knows more about that than we do. We presented that to the squad on Thursday night of last week. It wasn't something that they're interested in doing. It doesn't mean that they...
Well, what they said was it was illegal, they couldn't do it.
Right.
That they cannot take the money that they're billing and receiving and give it to the township because it violates the anti-kickback law.
But I asked Pete about that. And that's not 100% accurate. Can you explain that?
I think you guys are talking, but you're not necessarily talking about the same thing all the time. And I had an opportunity to speak to Jamie today and to the mayor today. And I think what this, we have a lot of good people in this room, and we have them every month. And everybody has an affinity for the town. I'm in the meetings. Has an affinity for the town. You have a town that's full of volunteers that any other surrounding town would be completely envious of. I mean, I got to tell you, being a Chemung resident, you guys are really lucky to have the squad that operates in this town so efficiently with the response time that you enjoy. It's fantastic. It's a model, okay? And then you have a population that serves the fire department that does an excellent job and has for generations. Everybody loves the town. Everybody comes to these meetings. Everybody constantly for years has been looking for a way forward here in view of competing assets, competing demand for the assets. And what's happened here is the squad's success has created a revenue stream that didn't otherwise exist. They want to maintain it and keep it. And the township wants to spread it to the benefit of everybody who provides it, because it is kind of a franchise, if you will. So there's merit in both sides' positions, okay? And so the real question is not what's legal, because either can be accommodated legally. The real question is, what do you want to do with that revenue stream? The squad wants to keep it, maintain their assets, operate as an independent entity, continue to provide a high level of service, subsidize the township's provision of their service by buying their own equipment and pouring the money back into the delivery of that service. That includes compensation to the members as an incentive, which I think also is a great idea and can be done legally. I don't know how it's being done by them. I suspect it probably is being done legally, but that can be done legally as well. And at the same time, you can bill for rescue and fire services on some level, as has been suggested by Mr. Barton and others. So the question really isn't what can be done legally, because now we're hung up on this conflict that the squad has now had and how to go forward, and the mayor has indicated that he doesn't think it was well received, and Kim has indicated that she doesn't think it's legal. And so people want to focus on the technicalities and say, well, we can't do this or we can't do that because it's not legal. The question is not what's legal. You can fashion any type of structure that you want that could be legal. What was proposed, I think, or what the mayor was wanting to say is that the township wants to have authority with your input, recognizing your contribution and the fact that you create the revenue, but the township wants to have some idea of what's happening with that revenue and why, to the extent that they want to make sure that the taxpayer is being treated fairly. How can you, as a committee, decide how to fine-tune your relationship with the squad? Make them pay rent, not make them pay rent. Make them pay for fuel, not make them pay for fuel. Make them pay for insurance, not make them pay for insurance. If you don't have a comfort level that they're using their resources wisely, the franchise that you have allowed them to utilize to their benefit and to the benefit of the community. And so, you know, when I'm told, well, I was told that it was illegal, we can't do what's proposed, that's really just nonsense, because you want to hang up on the legalities as opposed to getting to the real structure and hammering out what exactly you want to have going forward. Because it clearly is possible, like it's done in Medford. We have Kathy here, she can tell me if I'm wrong. Medford bills and collects all the money and then decides how to spend it.
That's because Medford does the billing. This is a separate nonprofit entity that's doing the billing. It's completely two different things.
But what this ordinance does is it changes Tabernacle to do the billing and takes it away from the squad.
And they would have to get, we would have to get our own number to do so.
Which is entirely possible. It could be done overnight.
Well,
So again, it's not about what's legal and what's not legal. It's a failure to talk directly about what the conflict is and resolve it. Because the squad can say they want all the money and keep all the money, and you can say under those circumstances you can't work here in Tabernacle. Or you can say we don't want you to have any control over the money, we want the billing franchise back, and we want all the money. And the squad can say, well, we don't want to do volunteer work in Tabernacle anymore. Somewhere in the middle, or to one extreme or the other, is what has to be decided. But for 3 or 4 or 5 years, It's being discussed in one machination after another. And because people don't want to talk about exactly what the issue is, it never gets resolved and the can gets kicked down the road. It's not about what's legal. It's about what do you want the structure to be and why.
Okay. Glad you asked your question.
Yes, I am.
Good.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm a little upset because you were part of the conversation when we took the property away from the squad and told the squad we weren't going to charge them rent, and you just threw out there that we should charge them rent, sitting there knowing full well that we told them we would not.
I didn't throw it out there that you should charge them rent. I didn't say that. I threw it out there that's an issue that's out there.
I'm
that
just saying,
doesn't
I
get
have a problem with that because I was part of the committee that sat here and said, give us your building. We paid $1 for it, and we won't charge you rent. They also pushed to get that building passed, and everybody in the room knows that. I'm not saying anything that's not true. They worked to get that building passed, and now here we are years later, we're going to kick them in the teeth and go back on our word. I can't do that.
Jim, I didn't
When I
say
give my
they should
word, I
pay
give my
rent.
word.
I didn't say that. Didn't say that. I don't have an opinion as to whether they should pay rent. I think that all of you should have an opinion though.
I think the focus should be on the taxpayers. What is best for the taxpayers? What gives the best value to the taxpayers, regardless of what was done in the past. We built a beautiful building that cost over $3 million. And I agree with what we're trying to do here, that the building should come in to the township, and the township should fund public safety just like it did before. When they were over on Hawkins Road, this township supported them and gave them everything that they need. Under this procedure, they'll still get everything they need.
Well, I think I mean, clearly we want to recognize that before the building took place, we were in a much different position than we are today. And I'm not sure that you're saying that we ought to charge the squad rent, because I think the only way you get involved in charging anybody rent is unless you have a completely separate relationship. I mean, let's just say for argument's sake, we had another company that was here that we contracted with. That may be a different story, but my thought is that it's pretty simple. When this discussion goes so far back that I had a conversation with Lenny about it, and when Lenny was the president of the fire company, we sat down one night, and he says, he said, bless you, keep it simple. That's exactly what this is. The only thing we're doing, or the only thing that I think we ought to do, is to have a structure in place, is essentially take the benefits of the building. We sat here, and Jamie sat here in an executive session, we talked about building. We had the opportunity to be able to take the building over. We didn't want any parts of the building because we didn't have the manpower, we didn't have any idea how it was going to work, and we didn't have the fire company. Now we know how it works, we have a fire company to contend with, and all of a sudden we have an opportunity where we've got a strong organization with the rescue squad, which has been built with taxpayer money, and we have a fire company which has been built with taxpayer money. Now we have an opportunity to be able to put a structure in place to have a person and the leadership of both organizations to run emergency services, and not to sit here and have meeting after meeting to talk about what to do next. And this person didn't do that, and that person didn't do that. I said to George the other night, I could care less of what's happened in the past. I said that to you probably 4 times, and I kind of felt bad when I said it, but that's the honest to God's truth. This ordinance is put into place to essentially put this behind us. We have so many other issues to deal with in town. And it's very simple. The game has changed a little bit because of where we are as a committee and where we are as a municipality in terms of what our emergency service responsibilities are. So take all the resources and put them in one place. That's my thought. I absolutely don't have any interest in nickel and diming it to the point where they pay rent, they do this, they do that. It's very easy.
I understand what you're saying, but stop and look at the entire big picture. We don't have a lot of fires in town, thank God, because if we had a lot of fires in town that we would be billing for, we wouldn't have a town. So in theory, you want to take the volunteers from one organization to fund all of emergency services.
That's absolutely inaccurate. We have a
That's the
line
only
item
place
in-
you're getting the billing from, though.
That's it, we have a line item in the budget to fund the fire company.
No, but you're saying we're going to take it all, put it into one pot. So you are using the money from the other volunteers to fund all of the emergency services. So one organization's providing the manpower that generates the revenue.
You could say the same thing about the line item in the budget that funds all emergency services too. You could say the same thing.
No, because where is that coming from? It's coming from the taxpayers, it's not coming from the volunteers that run the call.
I mean, theoretically, it's all the taxpayer money at the end of the day.
Again, it's about the taxpayers. When we dissolved the fire district, 100% of those funds did not go back to the fire company every year since then. It's been used to offset the budget of this township, which has benefited the taxpayers.
All right, let me put it in perspective. You go to work every day, you make a pay, right? You get your billing for your services, so we're going to take that, we're going to spread it amongst the committee. It's the same type of situation.
No, it's not the same
It
thing,
is,
because
because
I'm a
they're
private person.
right, but they're volunteers giving up their private time to provide a service for the town. The money's not going back to them, it's going back to the organization and what they're doing. They're buying trucks, they're buying supplies, they're putting it back to the community because we used to buy the ambulances. We're not buying them
They're also
anymore.
running 1/3 of the calls to other towns that are not in this township.
They're still billing and getting the revenue.
So they're in a building that the taxpayers at Tabernacle have paid for that benefits the towns that surround us by the number of calls that they run in them other towns. I over-requested to the county and had their records for the last 6 years.
And the same could be said about the
They're
other
called.
organizations that run calls. It's mutual aid. That's what we do.
So
We enter
when
into
is mutual aid
agreements.
mutual aid, and when is it a shared service?
What?
So I'm glad I did this because it's opening up a lot of stuff here. But I have a question for the mayor. I know that the public hearing is on the 25th of this month.
Yep.
Could we open it up to the public? I'd like to get some input here because I mean, I need to make a decision as to do we name organizations in this ordinance. So I'd like to hear from the public if anybody would like to speak.
We did that. Present this in the first place. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
And I do want to add, if Ms. Brown is correct, I do recall that there was a representation that if they turned over the building, that they would get free rent. So I'm not in any way trying to mischaracterize that. That is my recollection as well.
If you want to take some public comment, Joe, if I wasn't here, you'd be running the meeting, so it's your call.
Personally, I'd like to get some public comment.
Okay.
I mean, anybody else on the committee would like to hear, or am I the only one?
I'm always okay with public comment.
We are having a public hearing.
We're just still around in public hearing.
I guess the thing I want to ask is that, does the committee have I mean, because we're writing an ordinance essentially, that's going to be presented, and the public's going to be able to comment on it. We'll make modifications based on the public comment. That's what the public hearings are for. But the question I have is this: do we have a fundamental agreement that because of the learned success of insurance billing, that the township, or that we should explore the option or have the ability to be able to do billing and have that income come back to the municipality? Do we have a fundamental agreement on that at least, irregardless of who's doing it? Where that income, where the billing is done, for example, through a third party or what have you, and that income goes directly to emergency services, or we get a fundamental agreement of that?
I'm in agreement with that.
That's what you and I talked about today. You're still in the same position you were today, which was in support of that?
I'm not in support of that now.
That's different than what you had, we talked about today.
I said as a long-term solution, we could look to that. I'd like more to see us work with the squad and really begin or continue to negotiate what can be done.
Yeah,
I like the idea that they are buying their own equipment, we don't have to buy it, you know, we're doing pretty much their own stuff. And, you know, I don't know how much extra money there is beyond, above and beyond what they're doing. I'm not sure what we're quibbling over. We're talking $50,000, 75, 100, 125, I don't know. But if that pool of money is out there, I'd like to continue to discuss with the squad in a long-term sense, what can be done with it for emergency services in the town, what can they help with? I don't want us to get involved in billing. You know, I'm more into where we want to be 2 or 3 years from now, or a year or two from now, and using this money. I mean, I don't know what they're doing now, because it's a nonprofit. I'm sure it can only carry over so much a year. I know there's a limit to what can carry over into the next year. And, you know, I'd like to know what that amount of money is that we're talking about. Why are we having this big discussion over how much money? You know, the other part of it is they did the work. They've done a lot of work to put this together. We told them to do it. We didn't want to do it. We didn't want the township to do it. You weren't here then. Joe wasn't here then. It was just the 3 of us who were here.
No, he was here.
I mean, Joe Martin was not here.
No, but Stephen was.
Okay, well, okay, when Steve was here, I think that, you know, it doesn't hurt to go forward and see if we can get there.
I guess what, I mean, what are we talking about a substantial amount of cash, George?
No.
Go back to Rick's question.
No, we're not. We do have some money that we put away every year. We do have extra money, but that's placed into capital accounts as far as for, we have a replacement program for our ambulance. So we're in a position now where we put X amount of dollars a year aside, and that at the 5-year mark, when we're due to replace the truck, we have all, if not most or all of the cash to pay for the truck. So we're not
Jackson Tabernacle Rescue Squad. Sorry. That's my fault. I just called it Jack.
to pay for the truck. We currently maintain all the equipment, everything. We pay the bill. Even the township-owned equipment, we pay the bill. The rescue truck, since the day we delivered it, the township has not paid another dime towards that truck. All the maintenance, all that stuff has been paid for.
So going back to Rick's point, and Pete had pretty much outlined what we're looking at. Are you guys still willing to sit down and talk about income and about distributing that? Having a better understanding, and Pete probably explained it better than I did the other night, but are you?
The issue is as a private organization, that is the Tabernacle Rescue Squad, Inc., that has the Medicare license, that has the state license, if I were to bill for service as a private entity and then turn around and hand the township cash.
But we wouldn't do that.
Right.
But that's essentially what you're asking me to do, is to give you the billing.
No, it's not.
Well, that's the way it was proposed Thursday.
And I may not have been clear enough, that's why Pete was clarifying it tonight.
I thought the mayor, in my discussions with him and what he directed me to enable him to present, was the idea that the township would create a public safety department, an emergency services department, would bill, receive all of the money, and then there would be a committee, if you will, as described by Mr. Lee, to decide how to best spend those resources.
So then we're going to go back to where we were before we started, where we're now taking a revenue source, we're not using taxpayer money, we're not using tax money, and we're paying all our expenses. Okay?
No, not necessarily.
Well,
because I think, and as I said the other night, that if we were to do part of the thought was that we would incur more expenses for the building down here.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, right now, we cover those expenses, okay? We offered to pay our fuel. I went to the school district today and took over the fuel. We're gonna pay the fuel, okay? I have a check for the fuel for the beginning of the year, from the beginning of the year on, because we talked about it in 15, we've been trying to put this contract together, and we've said we're gonna do it, we did it. So we're paying our fuel. I'm more than willing to pay our insurance, or the piece of what the JIF costs, to reimburse the township for those costs. At that point, all the operational expenditures for the squad are covered by the squad and that billing money. It comes in, we pay all our bills. If I need a set of tires, I pick up the phone and call and get a set of tires. If I go back to what you're saying is, I need a set of tires, now I have to call the township and call Doug or call whoever and say, I need a PO for a set of tires.
I don't want to go through the conversation we had the other night, but that's not how it would work.
Well, I don't
How it would work, how it would work.
I don't know how else you
Okay,
could
you know what, I
do it.
think we're done with the discussion. Thank you very much, Chief, I appreciate your input. We need to can I get a feeling from the committee how we're gonna move forward with this, either way, so we can either do a roll call vote, or we can have some more dialogue.
You allowing public comment, or are you going back on that?
Not at this point, no,
Okay.
which we weren't gonna do anyway.
Well, it sounded like you were going to allow public comment because we weren't against public comment, but now that the public comment isn't going the way that you want it to, it's...
With all due respect, Mr. Kramer, you're actually speaking out of order.
I am, I know.
Okay, good.
My position is still the same, Mayor, it hasn't changed. I would like to see the flexibility in the ordinance and the changes that I recommended. And I think we need to stop kicking this can down the road and get this ordinance on the table and move forward. And create a Department of Public Safety.
Do we want to have some language in here to give some flexibility in terms of how billing would work? If we had an opportunity to be able to sit with the TRS, if indeed we ended up going down that avenue to allow for what you were trying to accomplish?
Well, the language is in here, right, that talks about the township taking over the building.
That's contrary to what the conversation was at the last meeting, by the way.
That's right.
Just for the record.
This is the version that
That
was
is
listed.
contrary to the conversation that we had at the last meeting. Because at the last meeting, the Tabernacle Rescue Squad was going to retain billing of services.
So that's what you and Steve were going to talk to them about.
But that's
and come
what
to
the
a conclusion.
conversation was at the meeting.
That's what
right,
And the
Mayor?
ordinance hasn't changed since then.
No,
It's-
but what I'm saying to you, the language that's in there is contrary to the conversation that was had.
Right, and then that's when you and Steve were going to get it, try to get it hammered out. So, but I was just pointing out so that everyone's aware right now, it's in there. It says, the Tabernacle Township Department of Public Safety, in order to support the provision of emergency services and volunteer companies serving the township, shall bill for emergency transportation and other services provided by emergency services operating within the township. That's how it was prepared in advance of the last meeting. It hasn't changed since then. And I understand Ms. Brown as to saying that, that hasn't changed, even though at the discussion at the meeting, that's not where we left it, right?
Correct.
Any more thoughts? You want some pullback on that?
Yeah, just one quick thought. I mean, you're dealing with an ordinance to create a public safety director, and it almost seems to me like the part about billing was kind of just slid in there. I'm not sure what that has to do with creating a public safety director. It's kind of like this has been added on. As this is written, I can't support it as long as it has something in there about billing. I mean, I would rather be talking about the position of public safety director. And if, we're going to go that way, that's what we should be discussing. This whole thing about billing, it's not broke. And I think we continue to work with the squad, and they've already offered tonight, and apparently they are picking up their operational costs for fuel, and I heard them say operational costs for insurance. I mean,
That's under the JIF. We would have to,
the whole reimbursement.
well, no, but it's different. It's, just to be clear, they would pay for the insurance, but they pay for it under the JIF, which we're providing. So it's another conduit, another connection between the two organizations, between the township and the rescue squad. My point is that they can't get as good a rate as they can with the JIF. That's my point. And I think it's important my personal thought is, and that's just me, but I think it's good to have them under the JIF because it reduces the cost for insurance. If they try to get insurance on their own, it would be substantially more expensive.
Well, again, I don't want to continue to belabor the point. I think with respect to this whole idea of billing, continue to talk with the squad about what can be done with money for emergency services. Maybe they'll say, well, we'll buy something for the fire company. I don't know. I think that's the direction we're going, and I don't think we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here. I think it's perhaps $100,000. I'm just guessing, not like we're talking, a big gold mine here, as long as they're meeting all the operational expenses that they have. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. You asked for public comment. Did you want to open that?
Actually, I would like that.
Okay. At this point, we'll open up the discussion for a few minutes with public comment. I will hold you 3 minutes. Steve Kramer, you're up first.
Steve Kramer, 1000 Old Indian Mills Road. I'm not coming up as the rescue squad captain. I'm coming up maybe with a different viewpoint on this than anybody in the room. I am fully in support of what Kathy came up here and said earlier, that I don't think you need a public safety director, and I served as the assistant chief of Medford EMS, which is now the Division of Fire and EMS, and also as the president. We had a public safety director. She eliminated that public safety director. I saw no noticeable difference to service, issues, or any of those sort of things without a public safety director. That saved Medford Township a substantial amount of money. I don't see that a town that has even less moving parts in an emergency service fashion, i.e. you don't have a police department like Medford does, would need something that we were able to eliminate in Medford for the taxpayers of that town to realize that savings. I don't see the point here. On the billing side of things, I understand the legal ramifications one way or the other. I understand that you can go out and get your own billing number tomorrow. That certainly feels like to me, as someone who dedicates myself to this organization at least 150 hours a month, that you're getting rid of me, that you're saying that my services are not needed, that you're going to do it on your own. I don't see the savings that you see, apparently. I look at Medford, for an example, has to pay a company to do that billing for them. I don't understand in a committee meeting or a committee that has had the discussions in the last 6 months that you are understaffed. You're hiring part-time staff to finish projects. You don't have the staffing that you need. I don't understand who in this office below us is going to take over the responsibility that our volunteers are doing, because it seems like you're looking at it from just the perspective of the money rolling in and not the people who are putting the ambulance on the street over 700 times so far this year so that you can have that billing. I understand that you're speaking about 1/3 of those calls, and I know that it's been said again and again and again that the taxpayers of Tabernacle see a benefit to an ambulance leaving this town, but let's talk about it for what it is. It's mutual aid. And unless this committee decides that you signed it, you signed a mutual aid agreement with Burlington County, the same as you did for the fire company. I have no choice but to answer that call when the pager goes off. The fire company has no choice but to answer that call. Now, it's not that I don't want to. Someone needs help, that's why I volunteer. Somebody needed help today in Indian Mills. They sent fire trucks, we sent ambulances because they called for us. But at the end of the day, that's on your desk. If you want us not to answer calls 1/3 of the time, or in the case of the fire company, over 50% of their calls are out of town. If you think that's not a benefit for the taxpayers of Tabernacle, then you need to go to the county and get us out of the mutual aid agreement. But understand the ramifications of that for this town is that when that fire happens here, or when in the second quarter we ran out of ambulances, not people to serve in those ambulances, but ambulances. I needed 4. I had 3. I had to call somebody else to come in and help us out. They have to call people to help them on fires. If we remove ourselves from the mutual aid agreement because we don't like that the ambulance is leaving town 20 whatever percent of the time of their calls, and being reimbursed through billing of another resident, not through your taxpayer, to bring that money back, then you're going to have to remove that. My last point is about the management. I don't understand why you want to add a level of management that's unneeded. And I look at the fire company as an example of this. Their air packs were very clear that the chief stood here and said, our air packs are going to go out of service. They need to be hydro. I need new air packs. And it got lumped into a larger bond that included paving roads, and it included buying dump trucks, and it included a lot of other things. And through discussion and a starting of a committee over the public works side of things, we tabled an ordinance, not an ordinance, but a bond to buy them air packs. October is pretty shortly. You may not get those air packs in time that they need because you were doing something else. So if you already have somebody that's managing those emergency services for you, that's using that money, there is no beach house. Listen, I volunteer for Tabernacle. I've been accused of a lot of things. I've had people in this room call my employer to try to get me in trouble on things because I volunteer with the squad. I've had people call and say that that I'm fraudulently doing taxes when my own accountant says I'm overly reporting things because I'm worried about that. I am here to serve the residents of Tabernacle, but I think that you are putting way too much bureaucracy in between the service that these people need and the people in this town who are willing to provide it.
Thank you for your comments. Any more? Ken? Okay. Mark, you have your hand up?
Yeah, it is actually.
Mark, you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah.
Mark, you're up. That's what that means.
Mark Mayor, 32 Washington Way. Yeah, just, you know, again, we got some strong organizations in town. We all acknowledge that. I mean, some concern and emergency services and fire. My concern as a resident is there are other elements of safety in the town that aren't, I think, are not covered as well. And I would respectfully would ask you to consider putting that into your ordinance that, or under the responsibility of your coordinator, to talk about the other things like the coordination with the police. As I just mentioned a second ago, we don't have a police department. I really don't see a very active coordination between the township and the state police. I mean, we know it's a training barracks. We heard a few weeks ago, we had someone come in, he wasn't the lieutenant, or he was actually standing in. You know, to come here every month and give us a report on what the police activities, what the criminal activities are, what the trending is in the area. We don't have a police department to do that. And really, one's going to argue that at some point we're probably going to have to. But right now, I think the least we should do is have somebody who's responsible for coordinating, collecting that data. Anybody who uses social media in town knows there's a lot of things that are posted by people see strange goings on in town. Things, people in backyards, strange vehicles, strange activity. It's all hearsay. I mean, quite frankly, like I said, I mean, I think what I'm looking for out of safety, public safety in this town is to fill in all the gaps that currently aren't covered by these organizations. And for the most part, these organizations are reactionary. I mean, not that they're not very well prepared, but they come to life when something happens. That's the way they're designed. What I'm looking for, from a public safety perspective, is how do we do things preemptively? How do we coordinate school activities? How do we coordinate drug awareness? I mean, I know all these activities are going on to some degree, but I'm not really sure anybody in the township is responsible for that. And I think that's important. You go to road safety, bicycle safety. I mean, again, there's a lot of elements of public safety in this town that transcend EMS and fire. And right now, I'm not really sure who you would go to. I mean, again, everybody picks up the slack, Doug, Public Works, all kinds of people, roads. But I really don't think I see anybody in this town who has the responsibility to look at the problem holistically. And again, outside these strong organizations, I think there's a lot of voids that should be filled. So I'd like you to just somehow consider that as you scope with this position, is to try to figure out whether or not we have that right coordination. At the very least, coordinating with state police instead of having our own dedicated police force. Thank you.
Want some more public comment? Then we want to close it.
Kathy Berger, 18 Woodson Drive. As we know, I'm opposed to this. I don't understand why. How does every other department in this town report? You have Public Works, they report to the administrator, correct? So why isn't the fire reporting to him? Like I was told what happened when you had the big dissolution meeting over at Olson School. EMS, you are taking on more than you can possibly imagine. If you think taking on fire was big, you have no idea what's coming if you want to take on EMS. If these guys don't do their job, hiring, firing, paying them, you're not going to have a dollar left to your name. The money is not going to go in and be a dedicated revenue for EMS or emergency services. It's going to come into the general revenue pot, and it's going to get strewn across just like the fire district money did. You're fooling yourself. I'd like that you had discussion tonight. I would ask that you have discussion prior to doing these type of ordinances, because I think we're always backpedaling. So I'll ask that again. What I would propose at the moment is you get a contract set with TRS, number one. That's something we've been talking about for 2.5 years now. How do you move forward with this without having a contract with them like you do the fire company? What I further say is I totally heard you, Mrs. Brown. I didn't know there was a deal with the other, squad building at the time. But this is what I was thinking when I watched the July meeting. You don't need a DPS salary, okay? You have an administrator, and he's perfectly capable of answering to 2 units. OEM already coordinates with the administrator all the time. So you already have that happening. There's your $6,000 savings. So after that, your balance billing. I've been asking this for 2 years now. Southampton does insurance and gas. They don't do balance billing. They don't do a contribution. I have asked if it's legal over and over and over again. Do that. You just saved yourself $35,000. Talk about rent. Have an open discussion. $2,000 a month is $24,000. That's a drop in the bucket for what they are getting, and treat them like a separate contract. They're running a good organization. Don't mess with it. If you do, you're going to be sorry. Believe me. I watch volunteers around all the different towns. We don't want to be one of those towns. We are a model. So have an open discussion about it and see what you can get. There's a penny of revenue right there. So you're still gaining something, yet you're keeping the services intact. So I ask you to consider that. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Kathy?
You may.
Tell us, how does the structure work in Medford? Because my understanding is in Medford that you have independent volunteer organizations serving a department, a public safety department, emergency
Well, we don't
services.
have a Department of Public Safety anymore. We eliminated that.
So what do you
We
have?
made a division of fire and EMS.
Same thing, different name.
Correct. And then we have a division of police.
Okay.
Department of Police, Department of Fire and EMS.
And so how is that different from what you think is being outlined by Mr. Lee?
Well, you're adding a public safety director. There, we eliminated that.
Otherwise, it's the same, right?
Correct.
So otherwise, when you say you're taking on so much you don't know what you're getting involved in, there's so much to do, how is
Well, I
that
heard
different?
it said we don't want to manage these. So first of all, you don't need a director of public safety if you're not managing anything, all right? But EMS, if you change what we have now, then you are managing something. And you're managing a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation that is big. You heard Mr. Kramer, 700 calls this year. You have to be responsible for that. Now you have to keep up on all their mandates that they have, just like the packs that they need done. You can't play around with this stuff. When they say they need air packs because they're going out, you need to take care of them.
I understand, how's that done in Medford? How's that accomplished, those administrative tasks in Medford?
We have a chief. We have a chief, and the chief reports to the township manager.
But other than that structure, from a financial standpoint, you're doing exactly that in Medford, which is to have a division of fire, what'd you call it? Division of fire and
Division of
safety?
Fire and EMS. They each have their own budget.
Which is
Police has a
populated-
budget, the fire companies themselves have a budget, EMS has a budget, and then the uniform fire, which is the career staff, have
And
a
who
budget.
does the billing?
The township does,
And where's all the money go?
into the general fund. And is anything dedicated per se for emergency services? Absolutely not.
So the only difference between what Mayor Lee is outlining and what you're commenting on is the administrative layer of the public safety director.
And all that income goes directly to the.
Could I ask one question? Do you have paid
All that,
services?
Yeah, they have some.
Yes, we do. We have career fire during the week. We have career EMS during the week. The rest is covered by volunteer. But I can tell you, we don't have a big volunteer pool. So we're supplementing some of the nighttime and weekend EMS crews.
so all that income goes directly to the general fund.
It has to, unless you're gonna have a dedicated by rider account. And I don't even know if EMS is allowable by that.
Do you have a question, Kathy?
Your daytime crew is 5 firefighters and a chief.
4 firefighters and a
firefighters
chief,
and
and actually 3 firefighters and a chief because they work a 4-day work week.
Okay. And you have part-time paid staff during the day for EMS.
Correct.
And that's,
6A to 6P, and we're covering 2 towns.
okay.
And that money comes out of the billing money as well, right?
Correct. And that's what I'm saying, you don't want to be in that. It's a ever-changing, rotating door for paid part-time EMS. And you can ask any town in this county about that.
Right.
So what you have here, regardless of how they do compensation or anything else, they're there. They're manning 2 crews, 3 crews when needed. There's something to be said for that. I think you're crazy if you touch it.
Kathy, thanks for your comments. And we're going to take one more public comment,
Sure.
and then we're going to call for roll. Yep.
Jen Cusick, 43 East Corner. I'm here for something completely different, so I didn't know any of this was happening. But I just wanted to make a point, Mayor, that you had said that there was a public hearing on this in July, I think you said?
No, there's a public hearing that's going to be on September the 25th, which everyone will have an opportunity to be able to comment on the ordinance.
Okay, I thought you had said that one happened already, and I just wanted to let you guys know that I didn't know anything about it.
No, we
And
didn't.
so, okay,
We've had discussion on it. This is the second meeting where we've had discussion.
okay.
We haven't introduced the ordinance, just to kind of tell you what normally happens. Normally,
Yeah.
an ordinance is introduced, there could be some dialogue amongst the committee, and then the ordinance has a public hearing, typically 2 weeks or whenever the next meeting is. This is very unprecedented, what we're doing tonight and what we did a month ago. We typically do not have public comment to this extent prior to ordinance being introduced.
Okay. I think there's probably a lot of people in town that have an opinion on this.
Sure.
And so I just want to make sure that you really get the message out in as many avenues as you can to the people of this town. Because I think, I mean, you know, Tabernacle Rescue Squad came and plucked my son and brought him to the hospital when he needed to go to the hospital, and they provide an amazing service.
Yeah, without a doubt. They both organizations do.
I don't want to see anything, you know, jeopardize that relationship.
Yeah, neither-
And I think a lot of people would like to.
And I will tell you, each one of us on the committee feels the same way you do.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. Thank you for your comment. At this point, I ask for a roll call vote unless anyone on the committee has any other comments.
I don't even think you have a motion or something.
Yeah, we do. Again, we're gonna be talking about this in 2 weeks. Hearing no other comments, roll call, please.
Before we go, there's no changes, right? At this point, this is a roll call on as originally introduced.
No, it's a roll call based on the modifications we made tonight, based on what your notes are.
Well, what
Would you review those, Peter?
So, because I did the maker of the motion, who moved to
Joe Yates.
Joe Yates? So Joe hasn't made any modification of that motion with respect to the proposed changes. Am I to take a shot at what I think there was a consensus opinion on tonight?
You made the motion.
I think there was a consensus opinion on, well, right now it's written such that it's the designated providers. There was some indication that there should be some flexibility, so it would be the designated providers or any future company. And so are we to limit it to that, or are we to keep it such that there's that flexibility that the ordinance contemplates potentially future different providers of those services in accordance with the sentiment of Mr. Barton and Mr. Lee and Mr. Franzen originally, I think. So that change, I think, was universal. So are you making that change, Mr. Yates? The other issue...
What was that change?
That the language would be changed to modify or to make it clear that the Division of Fire would be served by the Tabernacle Fire Company number 1 or another duly recognized company that's authorized by the township to provide that service. And the same with respect to fire. So that was the one universally accepted change, correct? The other was that it be listed as a paid position in reference to salary ordinance. Certainly, I don't think there's any indication that that shouldn't have been done on any level if we're going to include a personal public safety director. That we would change the Office of Emergency Management and appointment of the manager to read a committee because of our particular circumstance with the old township form of government, old committee form of government. So I think there was universal acceptance of that. That there should be background checks by all organizations, including both fire, EMS, and Department of Emergency Management.
Your motion. Okay. Just checking.
That's what I have in the way of...
We talked about clarifying the training and experience as determined by the committee.
As determined by the committee, correct. That was the last, I think, item that was generally accepted. So is Mr. Yates inclined to make all of those modifications? and
Yes.
Move to make those amendments?
Yes, I am.
All right, and so then you can go from there if that's what you want to do.
Mr. Barton, I think you made the second. Do you concur with those modifications?
Yes.
Any other comments from the committee? Roll call?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
No.
Mr. Franzen?
No.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Public hearing will be on September 25th, 2017. Resolution 2017-74, approving the placement of temporary signs for public right-of-way for the Tabernacle Community Fall Festival. Need a motion, please? Thanks, Kim. Need a second?
Second.
Mr. Franzen. Roll call?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2017-75, approving the raffle applications for the Church of the Holy Eucharist. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Thank you, Mr. Yates. Roll call?
Before we do, Peter, you want to do the divine doctrine thing?
Yes, we're going to invoke the necessity, doctrine of necessity on local matters. The judiciary has determined that under the statute, it's the legislature's intent that you take action in such matters, perfunctory as they are in this case, that would otherwise be paralyzed and no lower authority or to rule on it. So you're all conflicted to the extent that you have or you're a parishioner there, but in such a ministerial matter as such, you can invoke that doctrine and vote even in view of the conflict.
Thank you.
Roll call?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2017-76, approving the raffle applications for the Seneca Parent Group.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Barton. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Franzen, second.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. The guy with the blue blazer. Roll call?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2017-77, approving raffle applications for the Education Foundation Tabernacle Township, Inc.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Questions or comments? Roll call?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Parade permit for the Pinelands Preservation Alliance Tour de Pines Bicycle Ride, October the 8th, 2017. It happens to be my 49th birthday. Way. I look pretty good for being that old, eh? I need a
Sit
mo-
next to me.
I need a... Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty lively tonight, aren't you? I need, these are motions, so I need a motion to grant a parade permit.
I'll make it.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Can you second that? Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution to approve the parade permit for 2017 Plant Barrens 500 Adventure Ride, October 27th, 28th, and 29th of 2017. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Second? Thank you, Mr. Brown, or I'm sorry, Mrs. Brown, and Mayor Yates. Roll call?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Discussion of Public Works Subcommittee report.
What about the membership application?
Oh, I did, you're right, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Hollings. Membership application for the State Firemen's Association for Paul S. Hollings.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown, your second. Second. Thank you, Mr. Yates. Roll call?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Discussion of the Public Works Subcommittee report. Kim, you want to run with this?
Our discussion to solicit snow removal quotes.
What it says?
Well, we had a discussion about it a couple meetings ago, and it was the recommendation of the subcommittee to submit to the committee to ask for permission to go ahead and solicit snow removal subcontracts and sections out to be quoted on to provide service to supplement the township service. If you remember, we're downsizing some of our fleet.
thoughts from the committee? I served on the subcommittee with Ken, I think this actually makes a lot of sense. We sat with Doug, well, I should say we sat with the subcommittee, and unanimously we agreed to go down this avenue, but it needs to be formally approved by the township committee in order for Doug to be able to go out for RFPs. So we need essentially need a motion and a second to allow Doug to go out for RFPs for the specific areas that he had designated in our subcommittee report for snow plow removal quotes, or snow removal quotes. And the sooner we do that, the better, because we're getting into the season where this is going to start to happen. And thank you, Mr. Franzen, or Mr. Yates, whatever your name is.
I'll second it. Call me George.
Okay. Rick, are you making a second? Okay. Roll call.
Thank you. Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Before we get started on the committee reports, I want to talk about something fun for a change. Since we had that lively discussion regarding emergency services, this is something about something completely different. For the last several weeks and years, no, I'm good. Our committee, in one way, shape, or form, has talked about essentially the future for this building and the future for services that are provided by the municipality to the residents. And one of the things that we've talked about endlessly has been to potentially build another town hall, potentially renovate this one. I might need help now. I got it. Yeah. Anyhow, one of the things we've talked about is the potential of building another town hall. We've talked about renovating this one. We've had a lot of different options. And over the last several weeks, Doug and I specifically have looked at different pieces of property which would be available to us to build a new building of some sort, whether it be for public works or whether it be for a township building. Because the committee clearly has to make a decision about what direction we're going to go next. We've had a very lively discussion about emergency services. And this is another part of what we've got to work on as a committee, is to essentially buildings to house the services that we provide for the municipality, or for the residents. So one of the things we've talked about is moving public works. We've talked about building a town hall. In terms of land availability, our goal is, or should be our goal, as the members of the governing body, is to essentially put this building up for the least cost. One of the things that's involved in that is the purchase of land, unless we already own it. We looked at the Gravatt piece of ground next door to Hellman Concrete. That was $325,000, I think, initially, and it dropped down to maybe $250,000. But keep in mind, that's $250,000 that's already out of the bank before we've even put a shovel in the ground. So we looked at that. We looked at the Hellman piece, where Hellman Concrete is. That is up for sale. That's a substantial amount of cleanup work that needs to be done. We've looked at areas on the dump. Help me out with this, because there's a lot of spots we talked about.
We looked at the 2 acres next to Haas's gravel pit on Fork Neck Road. We've looked at the back portion, limited portion of the landfill located between Old Indian Mills Road and Oak Shade Road. That's limited by the amount that we've used for the landfill already and the requirements that we need for drainage. So that's very limited to the number of acres that are actually available to us there. So it limited our ability to be able to use that. We looked at, initially started looking at the parks, but both of those are in our open space inventory, so we can't use them. So if somebody said, well, you've got the ground next to the Cricket's Mill, it's in our open space, you can get that. Or it is very limited what building use has to be related to recreation. So they were the main sites sites we looked at. We did have a 2-acre piece on Richter Road. We looked at that, but that put us in the middle of a neighborhood. And we are not the most friendly neighborhood in a snowstorm, so our neighbors are used to us here. We would have to get a whole new set of neighbors used to us running essentially a 24-hour operation. So the neighborhood does not appear to be as useful for us.
One of the sites we've talked about for public works is the area behind the firehouse and also across the street, the community center. That's been one concept. But another concept we've talked about for a town hall relocation, if in the event we decided not to add on to this, is this piece of property here. Can anybody tell me where this is? This is located directly across the street. This is Sequoia High School here. This is their parking lot, or a portion of their parking lot. This is Nixon's. This is one more bar and grill. And this is the softball field here. This piece of ground is owned by the Tabernacle School District. It has the ability to be able to connect to the septic. It's centrally located, and it would theoretically connect with Sequoia, or at least be in the same, relatively the same lot as Sequoia. It's all one parking lot, or I'm sorry, it's all one piece of property. So there's a lot of legwork that we need to do to essentially decide whether or not we're going to go down this avenue or not. Dan Guzzi actually put this plan together to give us kind of a conceptual drawing about what it would look like, theoretically, from a potentially look like. This is the only copy of the map I had other than the copies that members of the committee have. This will be available for members of the public to review here in the township building if they would like to. But this is just a kind of a conceptual idea of potentially putting a town hall or a new town hall, if in the event the committee decided to do that, on this piece of property. One of the things that we need to do as a committee, though, is to talk to those folks in New Lisbon, also known as the Pinelands Commission, to find out whether or not this is even a possibility. So my question at this point, and I'll be happy to take questions from the committee, but specifically the question I have is, A, do we want to even look at potentially building a new town hall? Or at the very least, in this case, do we even want to look at the potential of building a building on that piece of ground? I will say to you that I presented this to the Township Board of Ed Liaison Committee about 3 weeks ago. It was well received there. They met last Tuesday as a full committee. They weren't real in favor of giving us the land, which I can certainly understand because we don't have a plan. So they don't really have anything to go on at this point. So what it really comes down to is this potentially a piece of ground that the township may be interested in putting a new town hall or a building at all? And if we are, then we need to decide whether or not to take the Pinelands and see if it's even something that's worthwhile doing. The only other thing I'll tell you with this is I met with Carol Birnbaum, who is the superintendent for Lenape. Their opinion was that it was entirely up to the township whether or not they want to build a building there or not, because the township owns the ground. Lenape leases that building. I will tell you that at one point, probably 18 months ago or so, before I walked into Sequoia, I thought, hey, that would be a great town hall. Let's wait until the end of the contract with Lenape. But Lenape invested close to $1 million in that facility. And in my opinion, it's a good revenue source for the school, for the school board, and for the Board of Ed. And it's not something we ought to really fool with, because I think they're good neighbors, and it's filling a good role. And in fact, that facility serves a very good purpose, which I don't think we really want to fool with. So I'll be happy to take questions from the committee. Dan, is there anything that I've missed that I didn't have?
Yeah, just one important factor in that piece of property is it is hooked up to the sewer. So it's one of the few properties that is actually hooked up to the sewer as part of the sewer service area for the wastewater plant behind the middle school.
We had, when we had talked to the Pinelands Commission back in February about other pieces of property, they weren't very much in favor of Hillman Concrete or the Gravatt piece, because we'd be taking agriculture, in the case of the Gravatt piece, out of agricultural production, which I don't think we really wanted to do. We floated the idea of having either a renovation done here or an extension done next door. They were more in favor of something right here in the village in this little quadrant because of the septic issue that Dan touched on. So, any questions?
Would you address a little bit the cost of renovating this building? Because I think that's a significant part of this too.
Well, I think that's something we need to look at. We need to look at what it would cost to build a new building. We need to look at what it would cost to do renovations to this. We don't have anything in place at this point, but it would take a decision by the committee to direct Scott England, as an example, as an architect, to give us an idea of what it would cost for a new building versus building something brand new. This discussion is simply about whether or not the township would be interested in this piece of ground. And if we would be interested in this piece of ground, we ought to talk to the Pilots Commission and see if it's even something feasible that we could do something with, whether it's us or whether it's the school district.
Well, I think it's a nice proposal that we should, there's a lot of ifs and buts around this, but one of the things we can do with that really wouldn't cost as much is to go forward and talk to Pinelands and see what they think about the idea. I know there may be some issues with gaining the property, but perhaps it's something that can be worked through in a mutually beneficial way. So I would, at the moment, like us to go forward with this. And somewhere along the line, I think we're going to have to take a look, as you just suggested, at what the cost of renovation here is. I know we have issues with our foundation and all, and perhaps the foundation might need to be replaced if we were to add on to this. And, there are all kinds of problems with the building that's 150 years old or so.
It's historic.
Yeah, it's a great historic building.
It's a historical building.
I know.
And what we're basically as a committee proposing would be a total renovation and addition onto this building. So basically that would be a question for Tom, is we would have, since it's historical, we would have to renovate this and keep it looking historic, am I correct?
We're not taking any more questions with the public at this time. You did that once already. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm not opening it up to public, I'm asking Tom.
There very well may be historical provisions that would have to be met.
We would also have to bring this up to the current code where it's applicable.
That would be the more expensive.
So, in theory, since you and I are both in the construction industry, it would be more costly, much more costly to do this building than to build another one.
I don't know if you could pinpoint a price on it without the investigation. It would be a costly and extensive renovation because the building would have to be brought up in barrier-free code. When you do the renovations, then other aspects of the code wouldn't kick in, i.e. the bathroom facilities are not adequate for the occupant load that's in the building now. That would have to be brought up. So all those things would have to be looked at. But yeah, that's barrier-free in New Jersey. But to say whether it's more or not, I don't. That would be something that Scott England would have a better idea on as far as the cost to do that.
That was Tom Boyd, the construction official.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
So with that being said, do we want to talk to Scott England about at least giving us some real numbers? Or do we want to?
I think we do the avenue Rick said, and let's approach Pinelands first,
Okay.
rather than spend any money.
Keep it in our back pocket, though. I mean, we need to,
Yep.
ultimately, but let's take it, one step at a time, I guess, and see if we can do something with Pinelands, see what they say.
Yep.
And also ask them about renovation.
Yeah. Kevin or Joe, any thoughts?
I have a question for Dan. Dan, any idea how big a building you could put on that lot over there? What would be the maximum build out for that lot?
We had, this one, the proposal we did was 60 by 60, going up to 60 by 80, but it had to be
2 stories.
2 stories.
Yeah, it would really depend on the needs. So I have no idea what the needs. We put a box there based on what we thought, looking at what you have here and knowing you need a little more space. just as a placeholder. Again, that's real conceptual, and then sort of based everything out on that. As far as what the total capacity, it's really going to be driven by drainage. The bigger the building, the more parking you're going to need, and the more drainage facilities you're going to need. And, you know, there are certain facilities that Sequoia has with respect to fields that are taken up. So, you know, there is a limit of space there. So the size of the building is going to be limited by that.
Can you count those fields in your drainage calculation?
Not really, but they don't produce any additional runoff per se, impervious coverage.
So what's the max size building we're looking at there roughly?
That building was 2-story, 7,200 square foot total, I think possibly going up to 9,600.
9,600, so
Yeah,
under
2
10,000.
stories, like 48, 40.
Do you have any idea of cost per square foot for a municipal building?
We didn't get
A
that
range?
far. We were looking at, here's where it could go on the plot, and let's see.
Nowhere near that far along, because
Yeah.
there's a substantial site cost too. This was just an exercise to see, geez, can we fit something in there? Is it feasible to even take the next step?
So what's the consensus of the committee at this point? Do we go talk to Pinelands?
Good question.
Okay.
We're talking about relocating public works. If we relocated public works, could we utilize the lot that public works vacates?
Sure.
And then you no longer have an acquisition for land price and can use it more towards the building.
Well, I don't think you're going to have an acquisition of land issue anyway. The land is already owned by the taxpayers. That's what one of the pieces that were attracted to us to this piece of ground was the fact it's already owned by the taxpayer. But that's certainly an opportunity also. We can talk to Pinelands about that.
And if you're looking to turn this into a museum, which I think at one point we had discussion of.
Yeah, I think Rick is the one that probably deserves credit for that idea. But this was one of the ideas with this would be, if we moved Town Hall out of here, this would become a museum, community center, and potentially more of a downtown area. This would be, as you said, a museum, among other things.
But my thought was if you put Town Hall next door, you have a draw
That's
to come into the building.
That's true too.
We leave this building, I believe it has to go back to junior mechanics.
As long as we use it for
Yeah, we got it for
municipal use.
$1.
We bought it.
You want it.
For $1.
If we vacate it,
Quite a lot of them.
never sell this building.
No, well, I don't, we weren't. gonna
No, but
sell
I'm
it.
just saying, we
As
could
long as we
never.
use it for municipal use, we're fine.
Steve, if I could
We could
add
rent it out,
something
no problem.
that was said, just to be clear, when we talk about museum, we're not talking about the building exclusively being a museum.
No.
We're talking perhaps about the first floor being this community center that we tried to put together. I think, the walls and such are down there that they can be removed and get a big building, and perhaps a museum upstairs. So that would be cool.
It's all, I mean, the ideas we're talking about are all conceptual.
Yeah.
There's nothing that we've decided, there's nothing that's etched in stone. The only conversation we're having tonight is this property of any interest to us as a committee? And do we want to talk to Pinelands about that being a possibility? We've got some other stuff to talk about as well in terms of next door and over at Public Works, which we can certainly do. So we'll go talk to Pinelands?
Well, Mayor, if you talk to parents about that, do you need to talk to them about this also? Because if we did something here, you'd have the same situation.
Yeah, that's what we'll
You want to tie
do.
into the same sewer system, right?
Yeah, that's what we'll do. And we have discussed this with them already. We did that back in February, and they have already said that connecting the sewer was something that was important for us to do. And that would be an added cost. The one thing I will say is this piece of ground is owned by the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed would have to vote and approve us acquiring the piece of ground. I will be very clear about that. It's not something we can take over with eminent domain if we don't get along with the school board for whatever reason, which I don't envision. But I want to make it very clear that the school board would have to approve the transfer of ownership of this piece of ground from the Board of Ed to the Township of Tabernacle. But at the very least, we have to find out whether or not Pinelands would be okay with us going there if we decided to do that. So we'll talk to Pinelands regarding this. We'll talk to Pinelands regarding this building as well. Is there anything else we want to talk about? Anything else? Do I have a yes from everybody that we're going to go to Pinelands? Are you with me, Mrs. Brown?
Well, I still would like the idea of looking at what we have here too.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, I mean, I think we, without a doubt. Yeah, part of the discussion. Okay. Thank you, folks. Committee reports, Mr. Kramer. I'm supposed to start with the engineer. Mr. Kramer, committee reports.
We need to talk about the DOT grant program coming up for the end of this month. We have in the past submitted Oak Shade Road. We have done it 2 consecutive times. We've had some lengthy discussion earlier in the year concerning our road program and roads that needed, at least some of our residents thought some other roads needed to be addressed, one of them being Carranza Road. I sent you a proposal back a few months ago concerning our road report and some recommendations. We have been working off the 99 road report that was done by a previous engineer, and there was a fairly lengthy discussion over how we decide what roads we're doing and whether we're still following the report or whether that report is still a valid report given the length of time since it's been. In my report on that, I recommended that hire Mr. Guzzi to update that report. Our direction has been in the past to work on subdivision roads with the local money and our main thoroughfares to be used for state DOT. In that recommendation, my recommendation was to apply for DOT money for Carranza Road and shift over our local funding for Powell Place Road, and then work from the future years based on the updated road evaluation as provided by Mr. Guzzi. So we're looking for some direction on that, for immediate direction on the current DOT application, whether you want to continue the old method of going after our through streets with the current DOT, or shift that over to Carranza Road. There is some jurisdictional differences in that, but we would be applying for state money, and in the future we could look to Chemung, or we could look to the state, which there is some jurisdictional issues on the lower end of that, after about a mile of it, to use their money to do their road, basically. But we would be sidestepping the other roads that we'd be doing, and our most road of need, major thoroughfares, Powell Place Road. That's about what we were going to spend on local roads in the budget. So our shift would be to that, and but what we're looking for tonight is which of the DOT applications she wishes to make, because Dan needs some time to do some preliminary work if we're going to move to Carranza Road. He has the preliminary work on Oak Shade already, but he needs some time to get that in and submit it in time so we're in this year's applications.
So can you run through the roads again, just so we can just specifically,
So
door number one, door number two, door number three?
The choice for a DOT grant would be either to reapply for Oak Shade Road again, or to shift over to Carranza Road. I think those are the two options, unless there's a third option put in there. But basically, you want to look for more collector type streets rather than internal development streets for the DOT grant. Typically, we've gotten grants are running in the low 200s, maybe $220,000 is the most we'd be able to expect, so we wouldn't be able to complete necessarily, say, Carranza Road, for sure not, but we can get a chunk of it done.
And my recommendation would be that once we start on that, we continue to keep applying for the DOT grant until we complete as far as we want to go on it.
Same as you did New Road? Same as you did.
Yes. Same as the upper end of Powell Place, we did that way. We go so far and then apply for it again. So,
I make a recommendation to go to Carranza.
Okay, anybody else?
I'm good with that.
We have a first and second, and third for Carranza, fourth. Carranza Road sounds like it's it. All in favor?
Aye.
okay.
Anything else?
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
So what then?
I passed it on. I guess my continuation of the question we did is our road bond issue that we talked about earlier in the year, whether we're going to move forward on that. And then as part of that, we also have, which was brought up earlier this evening by a resident, the SCBA funding for the fire company for their air tanks and their breathing apparatus.
The first question I have is why are we talking about this well after the case and essentially having it kind of brought out in public about these air packs? I mean, if the air packs were an issue, we shouldn't be having the conversation in September.
We had the conversation when I originally put the...
You did. You did, but here's my point. If the air packs were an issue, then there should have been some more discussion with the committee about the air packs than before today. So now that we've got that figured out, what exactly do we need in terms of air packs? Because as far as I'm concerned, that's a priority more than anything else, based on what I'm being told by the members of the public. They know more about air packs than I do.
Well, we have purchased 6 of them on the bond money that we had for the truck. We purchased everything we need for 4312. We have had the current air packs tested and brought up to the maximum allowable time. They will start to fall out of qualifications starting in January, and will work through slowly until September or October. You have a few that are that. The majority of them will
should be January.
should disappear in April, March, that time frame.
So not October.
We have taken the steps we need to do. We had a group that were going to be, we didn't think they were going to recertify them because they certify them for 5 years, and they were all expired with short of that 5-year period. But we've got them to expire at the maximum deadline of the 10th instead of short of that. So if we introduce next meeting the bond for the air packs, and you can give me a decision about the roads if we want to combine both of them. We could have that discussion again in October and get them ordered, and we were fortunate enough to get that turned around in about
That was pretty quick.
4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks time frame. We got the air packs turned around in.
That's good.
Why can't we do it on the 25th?
We can introduce on the 25th because I have to have the certification from the auditor and the bond council to introduce.
The only reason why I'm saying I'd like to see it on the 25th, I mean, I'm not a firefighter, I applaud the job they did, but I'd be darned if I'd want to use an air tank that it's on the last leg.
It's the end of its ability to be certified.
But that's what I'm getting at. How does it doesn't work?
Right.
That's why I'm saying faster is better.
That's got nothing to do with roads. It's got nothing to do with roads.
And I can't, correct me if I'm wrong, I can't introduce bond ordinance without the certification at the end of introduction, is that correct? From the auditor and bond counsel on what I can introduce by title on the bond ordinance. So we can introduce on the 25th and we can pass in October and order immediately after. And given the time frame we got them from Scott this last time,
It speeds it up 2 weeks.
we should be able to have them here, at least the amount we can buy this year, to get the majority of them bought. We have $130,000 in the bond, which should get us, we paid 40.
But that was 2 red packs.
Yeah, that two red packs, so we're around 40,000 for 6. So that'll buy us another,
We did submit for a FEMA grant
okay?
for those. We just haven't heard yet, so whether we'll get it or not.
But that, we should be in the neighborhood of 18 additional packs. And then I'll, as soon as we get into next year, we can go and purchase the balance.
So if we can speed it up, I'd like to say speed it up.
So we do a bond ordinance for air packs plus roads?
That's what I would like to do.
Can you be more specific about what roads we're talking about?
We'd be looking at paving Powell Place Road from Southampton Township line to just past El Dorado, where that, where the new paving started. No, to the bridge to El Dorado. We have paved Southampton to the bridge. We paved past El Dorado all the way to Cedar Place.
Did Southampton pay their portion? Because it was really bad. I haven't been down there in a while, but it was.
They've done some more patching.
They have, but others have agreed that they may be doing a bond ordinance for the roads, and that section was to be included in that, so.
They've talked
It's bad, you know,
Should
it's
we
still
be,
bad.
should we be talking to them and saying, you know, look, we're gonna pay this, why don't you pay it? Because,
Something I can talk to the administrator about.
yeah, I mean, last time I was down, it was real bad. It was worse than our road. It was in bad shape.
Yeah. It was not.
You'd be guaranteed it's not higher on their priority list.
No.
It's not,
I mean, it's a small stretch from New Road to
Right.
Line.
that's what I'm saying. What do they have, 6 residents on that?
We had that cul-de-sac there too.
Yeah, get the cul-de-sac off there and make that 2
Okay.
houses on the other side.
We can get a map and look at exactly what that stuff is, but we need a motion if we were going to move forward. Or not.
Need a motion?
Yep.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Doug, anything else?
That's all I have for the moment.
Pete?
I'm going to save my time for executive session. I have a number of items, thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, Doug stole all my head.
Should go with him first. Colonel Lowe?
At the risk of kicking a dead horse that's already been kicked a lot, we talked about this public safety grant. We focused on, and everybody that's talked about this has focused on the relationship between the fire company and the rescue squad is focused on public safety grant. If that was the only focus of the public safety director, I wouldn't even support it because there's no need for it. Actually, Mark brought up what the real need for public safety is. It's all that other stuff. Part of that is things like this. This is from New Jersey Office of Homeland Security Preparedness, and it's a bulletin about 9/11 and what happened on 9/11. But more importantly is the next page, which is when I mentioned about the fact that you want to coordinate and combine the public safety director with the OEM, one of the things you drag with that is the LEPC. And people have a feeling that they don't understand what the LEPC is, Local Emergency Preparedness Committee. So one of the things the Local Emergency Preparedness Committee is look at preparedness of the township. Look at all those aspects of it. Now, Mark talked about the fact we don't talk to state police, but we in fact have delegated that job to the OEM. So the OEM does talk to state police. The OEM does all that stuff. That's preparedness, that's getting prepared ahead of time. Public safety director should be doing some of those things too. Without that, you got me. And that gets the second part of this, and that's preparedness for hurricanes. So tomorrow night at the LEPC, we're going to talk about preparedness for hurricanes. What are the assets that we've got in place in the township? How to coordinate those assets? Now, public safety director is not going to have the tactical control of anything, but is going to have the ability to put together what are the plans. The OEM has no tactical control of anything before an emergency, but puts together the plans that are going to be done ahead of time to get to the preparedness. When the rubber meets the mud and you declare an emergency, the only guy that can do that is the OEM. When that happens, it's all else changes. Comes the rule of law and all the other things we talked about. So emergency preparedness is public safety. We sometimes use those terms interchangeably because they mean something to us, and they don't necessarily mean something to somebody that doesn't look at it. So, tomorrow night we're going to talk about hurricane preparedness. Why? What's going on? Is that going to affect us? Is the hurricane danger, the threat facing Tabernacle going to be any worse than it has been in the past? What the National Weather Service says, it's going to be an active year. Well, what does active mean? A level 5, 6 hurricane? What happens if there's that? That's the kind of thing that the LEPC does. That's preparedness. That's the stuff that's done before the emergency. That's the stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow night, and that's what this is here. So you can see all those things that we talk about. What is stay informed? Things you talk to the community about. The 911 system, or the Swift 911 system we've got to talk to the residents, to tell them so they're informed. The Facebook page, all of that. Emergency communications plan. How are we going to talk to each other? Which is when we get into the communication systems we got within the township, and we talk to the elements of the township, and what have we got to do. We have done these things, we do these things, we talked about them, and now we're going to continue that process going into this hurricane system. So I want you to understand that this public safety thing is a big deal. It's not just the fire company talking to the rescue squad. Part of it is what I've been doing my whole life. And that is, somebody has to protect the people that will do the things that nobody in their right mind would do willingly. Whether it's soldiers, whether it's firefighters, whether it's EMTs, nobody in their right mind would do that voluntarily. So it takes a special type of person to do that. Well, somebody's got to protect them. Somebody's got to make sure they're taken care of. That's all part of public safety. But somebody's got to be taking care of the public too. What are the state police doing? How are they talking to us? We talk to them all the time, but there's other things, there's other aspects of it. So I want you to understand, it's a bigger initiative thing. And part of it is LEPC, how important that LEPC is. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. 7 o'clock tomorrow, correct?
Yes, sir. 1900.
Left your book up there.
And we did the committee, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to talk about mutual aid. And I did meet with John Brinker. He's the County Director of Public Safety for about 4 hours one day. We talked about this. And he recognized the concern also because he's the former mayor of that And when is mutual aid mutual is my question. And if our town, our fire company, and our rescue squad, and they do a wonderful job, and they're responding to other towns more than them towns are responding to us. And when you look at our rescue squad, about 3/4 of their time goes to other towns. In 6 years, 0.001% of the time, they've had a response back. Is that really mutual aid? And that's my question. When is mutual aid mutual? I would hope that over a long period of time, it would be mutual. That if we saw you 1/3 of our time, over that same period, maybe it's only 20%. But for it to be less than 1%, less than 100%, is mind-boggling to me, and the facilities that we built were built for the residents of Tabernacle with mutual aid in mind, naturally, because that's part of the game. And that's how we respond, so that we can keep the size of the fleet and the volunteers at a minimum in each town, so they can help each other, so they can respond, so that we don't have an overabundance of vehicles and equipment in one town and not in the other, that they're equal, so that when you need that extra rig out, or you need that extra fire truck, whatever type of equipment it is, the other town has it for you. Otherwise, every town would have to staff themselves with big fleets of equipment to handle their own needs. So that's what mutual aid was all about, the way I understand it. So I just wanted to clarify that. So again, my thing is, when is mutual aid mutual? Today, Mayor, I had the pleasure of attending 2 9/11 services. When I was the president of Bryan County 200 Club back in 2001, when the World Trade Center was bombed, a friend of mine named Pete Clifford, who was a captain in Morristown Fire Department, and we put a memorial service together that we hold every year at the Trinity Church in Morristown. We've had it for 15 years. And we had that this morning. And we have some very unique speakers that we've had over the years. And this service, it's a church service, and we have a breakfast for all the firefighters, EMS, and police to come, and our town has been there many times in the past. It's not about us, it's about 9/11, the first responders, and those that lost their life. And today we had a guest speaker named Dan Rivera. And I've known Dan a long time. He's a construction guy, and he worked with me in construction, and Dan was a first responder that day. Dan worked for a company called J. Fletcher Kramer, and they sent him, he got clearance, he went over to George Washington Bridge, and that day he was at ground zero with a whole fleet of dump trucks, front end loaders, bulldozers, you name it, to start picking through the debris to get it out of there so that the firefighters could get in, and he was our guest speaker today. And I gotta tell you, he was very emotional when he started to think back about the number of bodies that he had to see, that he had to uncover and expose. So that was my first service today. The second service I went to today was in Mount Laurel Township, and if you go down to Elbow Lane, at their firehouse, they built a brand new 9/11 memorial service. There's a piece of the World Trade Center building there. There's a big I-beam, and it's on two galvanized posts, which are to symbol the two towers, and it's pointing north towards New York City. They also have a rock there that came from Swanksville, Pennsylvania, from Flight 93, and they also have a piece of stone from the Pentagon. And if you look at the shape of the monument that they built, it's built in a pentagon, and it's built so that you can touch everything that's there. So they had a really nice service there today, and they had they played a soundtrack, which was actually quite moving. It was of one of the fellow New York City firefighters he was in his stairwell trying to rescue people, and they had his whole conversation going back and forth with the dispatcher, and then of course it went dead, and that's when he died, unfortunately. They had two very distinct speakers there today. They had a gentleman who actually worked for Morgan Stanley and was on the 77th floor that day. And Morgan Stanley had their own public safety director that works for them, telling their people to get out, and the building was telling everybody to stay. And he was blessed enough that he was able to get out. He went from the 77th floor all the way down, and he was able to get out of there. He talked about his experience. The other gentleman that was there is a retired fire marshal from New York City who was one of the first responders. So, you know, it's something that we always need to keep alive, so that, and I commend you for going to the grammar school and talking to the kids, so that, you know, there's kids and there's young, you know, think about it, there's 50-year-old kids weren't here when that happened. So that's all I have to report. It was a very humble, solemn day.
Thank you, Joe. Rick?
Thanks, Jim, for sharing. One quick thing, my fellow committee members know that I will not be able to make the next meeting. Unfortunately, I'll be out of town and can't be here. Other than that, I'll pass it on to Mrs. Brad.
I just want to add some comments. As you can all tell, I'm very impassioned when it comes to volunteers. I've spent many years myself volunteering. However, my volunteering is nowhere near what the fire company and squad does. I could never even begin to do things like that. And I appreciate the fact that these are people that live in our town, are residents, are our neighbors. And nothing meant more to me than when my daughter was in a horrific accident in front of my house, seeing people that I knew there gave me a sense of comfort. And those of you that were there that day know I was a wreck because my daughter's car looked like it was blown to smithereens, but seeing people that you know gives you a sense of comfort that makes you in a different place. And I don't ever want to see the volunteers of our community go away on any side, whether it's fire or emergency squad members, because they all have a vested interest in this community. This is where you live. This is what you care about, and this is why you do it. Because it is where you live. It is why you want to serve, because you're serving people that you know, people that are your neighbors. And you may not necessarily know that neighbor, and you meet under unfortunate circumstances, but you're there and you're there to help. And for me, it's even more important now, as I know my fellow committee members know, and not many other people know, that my husband was diagnosed with a horrific disease. And believe me, I want to see people I know if I have to call someone. I really do. So that's why it's very important to me to make sure that everyone else has that same sense of comfort when they have to make that phone call to 911 and need someone, whether it's for fire or an ambulance, because it makes a big difference to you knowing that they're your residents and knowing that you're your neighbors. So do I get impassioned about it? Absolutely. I'll be the first to admit it. But I'll always vote for the volunteers of this community, and everybody out there knows it. They know how impassioned I am. I've always been. It's just my situations have recently changed. And just a little follow-up of a comment to what Mr. Barton was talking about, mutual aid. I understand that Mr. Barton's a little concerned that it's not mutual aid because we don't have other communities coming in. But I think what that really says is our volunteers are doing a great job. They're getting out to all the calls, and we don't need the mutual aid. You know, I know the fire company sometimes needs it when it's a big dwelling, but when we're doing mutual aid and we have enough vehicles and volunteers to respond and don't need to call for it, I think that's just a commendable job that volunteers do. And that's all I have. And thank you for reporting about your 911 ceremonies. That was very, very.
Joe?
Nothing to report.
Okay. With that being said, we're going to move on to public comment portion of the meeting. If you're interested in being heard this evening, please raise your hand. I'll call on you and limit your comments to 3 minutes or so. At this point, we're open to the public. Mr. Lemire.
Mark Lemire, 32 Washington Way. Just real quick, you might have been distributed I am the chairman of the Tabernacle Recreation Committee. They've given Sean to distribute the annual report.
I knew you were going to come up here and talk about that.
I just want to just make note.
As soon as you walked up here, I knew
well,
you were thinking.
Just want to make note that we have selected a date, our subcommittee has selected a date for the upcoming tree lighting. It's for December 1st, Friday, December 1st. I just want to get that on the record, make the public aware of that. We weren't sure what procedure, if we need to get a permit, or if there's, because there's now under the offices of the committee, we need any position other than just coordinate internally.
I think the biggest responsibility is getting Santa and Mrs. Claus. I got you, Mrs. Claus.
We'll work on that.
Mrs. Claus is signed up.
Santa's pretty busy that time of year.
Santa's in too?
So.
I had asked Mark to bring this up because last year we did do a motion for this committee approving it, so I thought maybe we need to do a motion again this year, just to formally say, you know, it's okay to go forward.
We have a motion from Mr. Franz. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mrs. Brown. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public. Stephen, you got to raise your hand, but let you get up to exercise.
All right, Steve Kramer again, 1000 Old Indian Mills Road. I actually intended that this was all my public comment was going to be. I appreciate that the committee was willing to have a conversation tonight. I think the dialogue was good. I know that there are emotions on both sides. I understand that. I think it speaks to the dedication that you have, both from our committee to the taxpayers of town and the volunteers in town to the same folks, both in our own arenas. To that point, I wanted to share with you, and this is, I tried to do this back in August, but this was an article that was written about one of our volunteers. I know that not everybody in Tabernacle gets the Tabernacle. I'm one of them. I've been reading a lot about the Chemung referendum instead. But I just wanted to share that with you so that you could put a face to these numbers. I know that we have spent endless hours talking about how many calls go where, what the percentage is, what the numbers are monetarily that this committee thinks that they can take out of that organization and give to others. I want you to understand that there are neighbors of yours, friends and family, who are volunteering their time on both sides. The part of me, the Republican part of me, found this meeting very interesting.
See, Republican?
The Republican part of me has found this meeting very interesting. That you have two things that this township's known for. There's many things this township's known for, but two things have been discussed tonight. Snow removal and your rescue squad. And you've looked at privatizing snow removal, and you've looked at taking a private organization, making it public, and adding a level of bureaucracy, which seems counter to my understanding of what some of you have run on and what I voted for some of you to do, which was to limit the size of government and to lower my taxes. And I don't see where the discussion about a public safety director and taking forcefully the funding through whatever legal channel you can do it of the Tabernacle Rescue Squad and essentially creating your own department that you're hoping that all our volunteers will come over to does that. I don't see that it limits the size of our government, and I don't see, and I think you've heard from a few people tonight, including people who are well versed in this in other places, that it has the potential to balloon our taxes instead of lower them. So I would hope that after we all get past the emotions of the initial conversation before we come back on the 25th, that the same people who have talked to me privately without emotion in front of me think about the things that we're doing and make sure that we're doing the right thing for the Tabernacle Township folks, not our own emotional responses to things. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else at this time? George?
As I said before, this is the...
Can you tell us who you are, please?
George Jackson, Chief Tabernacle Rescue Squad. That's the field. The whole mutual aid thing, we talked about that, and somebody was right to make the point that it's because of the success of the organizations. In EMS and for our world, in talking to other chiefs, they would love to be able to cover every call. You can look at it two ways. It's a sense of pride. The other thing is every time you go out in the ambulance, you transport somebody in, it's a revenue source. Not that that's our focus and that's our goal, but in the end, that's the truth of it. The fact that we handle 100% of our calls in town, although, and twice this year we've used mutual aid at a call because we ran out of ambulances. And that was literally the problem. We ran out of ambulances. Or we had ambulances on other assignments, so the mutual aid was closer, we used that. And that was on 2 occasions. But we have a very strong volunteer base here. And I'm willing to take some fault into some of the coordination issues and the personalities and stuff that we get into. But I saw something today that was remarkable. There was a fire on a Monday morning at about 10 o'clock. At that point, there were 20 volunteers from Tabernacle Township serving the communities that surround us. Yeah, we might have been in Chemung, or our ambulance might have picked somebody up in Tabernacle, and then went to Southampton, and then came back to Tabernacle. And the fire company went to a call in town. We had 20 people. We had more volunteers at that call than the other companies combined. That should speak volumes for what you have. Are there issues? Absolutely. Will we ever be 100% perfect? No, we will not be. Do I think we need to take it to this extreme that we're discussing? No. I've said it, I just said it, I've said it before. we all have personalities, and I will take blame for certain things that I've done, or, hard-headed that I am. But that makes us what we are. But we're taking it to an extreme that we don't need to take it to. We're adding another layer that we don't need to take it to. Unfortunately, Rick's not going to be here. I think it's important that everybody's here, and we have this conversation again, the same way we had it again. The other issue is if you pass the ordinance as it is, and although a number or whatever may be possible to get overnight, although I know it doesn't happen that fast, what's the plan? That is a major undertaking. I know what it is to do billing. I don't even do it in the squad. I have somebody that does it for me, and I know what an undertaking it is for that person to do. This isn't something that somebody's just going to do on their day off. It's not that level. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. I am willing to work with committee, but we have to be reasonable on both sides. So I look at the volunteers, I look at these guys. We get to the call, we're all there to do the job, we do the job. And that's what we did today. And Tabernacle should be proud of their volunteers for what they did today. Even though it may not have been within the 49 square miles of Tabernacle Township, we showed up, we handled the job. And these guys, the ones that were here, even if these guys weren't here today, they would be there tomorrow. They should be commended for that. And just the same for mine. Thank you.
George, can you take this check back?
No.
Excuse me?
Hey.
It's gonna get lost up here. Give it to LaShawn at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
You say no? Who doesn't want to check? Anyone else in the public at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public. At this point, we're going to do executive session, whereas the governing body wishes to discuss the following executive session matters pursuant to NJSA 10.4.12b, 7 contract negotiation regarding offer to purchase PDC credit, personnel matters related to the Department of the Township Administrator, litigation matters related to Fran Brooks v. Tabernacle Township, and the potential litigation for 14 Moore Road. Be resolved, the public shall be excluded. This will be closed to the public. We will come back in the public session when may or may not take action. At this point, I need a motion to go into executive session. All in favor? Thank you, folks.